What would you do if a masked robber stormed your train? One man knew exactly how to handle it, and he wasn't just anyone. The steady rhythm of the train echoed through the morning air as it snaked its way towards Sacramento. For most passengers, this ride was just another part of their daily routine, an hour of scrolling through phones, sipping coffee from travel mugs, or staring out the window at the passing landscape. The car smelled faintly of burnt espresso and metal, a sensory backdrop to the quiet shuffle of papers and murmured conversations. Among the sea of passengers, a man in a plain baseball cap and dark sunglasses sat quietly in the corner, blending into the crowd. His posture was relaxed, almost too casual for someone on a packed train. He had the kind of presence you'd easily overlook, unassuming, anonymous, invisible. But a few sharp eyes might have recognized him, though most were too preoccupied with their own lives to notice. A woman near the front adjusted her toddler's jacket, her hand trembling slightly from exhaustion. 2 seats back, a teenage boy with a skateboard propped against his leg tapped out a melody on his thigh, earbuds blasting music loud enough for the rows around him to hear. Meanwhile, the elderly man in the aisle across leaned on his cane, occasionally offering a polite smile to the people passing by. It was an ordinary day, or so it seemed. But sometimes, the line between normalcy and chaos is thinner than we think, and as the train pulled out of the next station, the passengers had no idea they were about to cross it. The train had just settled into its usual rhythm when the first warning sign appeared, the sharp sound of heavy boots clanging against the metal floor. Heads turned as a man, tall and broad-shouldered, marched purposefully through the aisle. His face was obscured by a black ski mask, and in his hand was something that made everyone's stomach drop, a gun. "Listen up!" the man barked, his voice booming over the hum of the train. "Nobody move, and no one gets hurt." The car went silent. The air suddenly thick with tension, passengers froze mid-sip, mid-text, mid-thought as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't a prank or a bad dream. This was happening. "Wallets, phones, jewelry, put it all in the bag," he demanded, tossing a worn oversized duffel bag onto the floor. The sound of it hitting the ground made people flinch. The robber moved with calculated menace, his gaze sweeping the car like a predator sizing up its prey. A young woman in a business suit fumbled nervously with her purse, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The man snatched it from her and glared. "Faster!" he growled, making her recoil in fear. A few rows back, the mother with the toddler clutched her child tightly, her face pale as she tried to shield the little one from the unfolding nightmare. The boy with the skateboard glanced around, his wide eyes betraying his panic. No one dared to speak, much less move. The robber's voice cut through the silence again, "Anyone tries to be a hero and I promise you'll regret it." His tone was cold, almost mechanical, like he'd done this before and had no reason to doubt his own words. The passengers were too frightened to resist, too overwhelmed to think clearly, but not everyone in the car was paralyzed by fear. The man in the baseball cap adjusted his sunglasses slightly, his face unreadable, but something about his stillness hinted that he was watching more carefully than anyone realized. The robber's pace quickened as he made his way down the aisle, barking orders at each passenger he passed. The once muted sounds of the train were now replaced by the rustle of hurried hands reaching into bags, the clink of jewelry being removed, and muffled sobs as people surrendered their belongings. He stopped abruptly at the elderly man with the cane. "What's in your pockets, old man?" the robber growled, pointing the weapon directly at him. The man's hands trembled as he reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather wallet. This is all I have," the man stammered, his voice shaking. The robber snatched it and threw it into the duffel bag without a second glance. He turned his attention to the boy with the skateboard. "You too, kid. Hand over that phone." The boy hesitated, glancing at his mother a few seats ahead, her terrified face urging him to comply. With shaky hands, he held out his phone. Please don't hurt anyone," the boy pleaded softly. But the robber wasn't satisfied. His eyes scanned the passengers, landing on the young mother clutching her toddler. She had kept her head down, trying to remain invisible, but his gaze bore down on her like a spotlight. "What about you?" he said, stepping closer. "You think you're special? Put the kid down and give me that purse." The mother shook her head instinctively, clutching her child tighter. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Please, just let us be." The robber raised his voice, anger flaring. "I said drop it." He waved the gun menacingly, and the entire car seemed to hold its breath. It was in that moment that the man in the baseball cap finally moved slowly, deliberately. He stood up from his seat, his sunglasses catching the dim light as he turned his head toward the robber. "Leave her alone," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The robber turned, clearly taken aback. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" he sneered. The man tilted his head slightly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Just someone who's had enough of your show," he said. The passengers exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified as the tension in the car suddenly shifted, like a storm about to break. The robber squinted at the man, his confusion morphing into irritation. "Sit down before you get hurt," he snapped, waving the gun for emphasis. But the man in the cap didn't budge. He slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp, unmistakable eyes that immediately struck a chord of recognition in some of the passengers. A hushed murmur rippled through the car as whispers of realization spread. "Wait. Is that?" someone whispered, their voice trailing off. The man took a step forward, his movements calculated but unthreatening. "You've already scared everyone here enough," he said evenly, "but if you think you're calling the shots now, you're wrong." The robber let out a bitter laugh. "You think you're some kind of tough guy? You think you're going to stop me?" He stepped closer, leveling the gun at the man's chest. "I don't care who you think you are. One more step and I'll put you down." But there was something unsettling about the man's calm. It wasn't arrogance or recklessness, it was quiet certainty. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the man said, his voice steady as stone. "You're already in over your head." The robber's face twisted in frustration. "Oh yeah, and what are you going to do about it, old man?" The words barely left his mouth before the man moved in one fluid motion. He stepped forward, his hand snapping out to grab the barrel of the gun. A twist, a pull, and suddenly the weapon was out of the robber's hand and clattering to the floor. The maneuver was so fast, so precise, that it left the robber and everyone else momentarily stunned. Someone gasped, a loud, audible intake of breath as recognition fully dawned. "It's Keanu Reeves?" a passenger blurted out, their voice echoing through the car. The name hit the robber like a slap. His bravado faltered for the first time as he stared at the man standing before him. "You're kidding me," he muttered, his eyes darting between Keanu and the disarmed gun on the floor. Keanu didn't give him time to recover. "Sit down," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The robber hesitated, glancing around as if weighing his options, but it was clear the balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. The passengers sat frozen, caught between awe and disbelief, as they realized they weren't just witnessing a robbery, they were watching a real-life hero take control. The robber's hesitation turned into panic. He lunged for the gun, his hand darting out in a desperate attempt to regain control. But Keanu was faster. With a swift, practiced motion, he kicked the weapon across the floor, sending it skidding out of reach. "Not happening," Keanu said firmly, stepping between the robber and the rest of the passengers. The robber snarled and charged, swinging wildly with a clenched fist. But Keanu sidestepped with ease, his movements fluid and controlled as though choreographed by years of experience. He grabbed the robber's arm mid-swing, using the man's own momentum to flip him over onto the floor. The impact was loud, reverberating through the train car. The robber groaned, stunned, but Keanu didn't let up. He pinned the man down with a firm grip, his knee pressing into the robber's back. "Stay down," Keanu said, his voice calm but commanding. The passengers erupted into cheers and gasps of relief. A few clapped, while others exchanged disbelieving looks, as if trying to process what they'd just seen. "Is this really happening?" someone muttered, their voice a mix of awe and disbelief. The young mother, still clutching her child, let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Keanu didn't respond, his focus remaining on the subdued robber. "Someone call 911, he said without looking up. The teenage boy with the skateboard fumbled with his phone, his hands still shaking but determined. "I've got it," he stammered, dialing quickly. The robber squirmed beneath Keanu's grip, trying to break free. "You don't know who you're messing with." The man spat, his voice full of bluster but lacking conviction. Keanu leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, steady tone. "You picked the wrong train." The train began to slow as it approached the next station.